Welcome back. I hope the introductory information that we have shared with you has sparked some interest to learn more. Now we're going to discuss the concepts of the Resiliency Program in more detail to explain why it's important for leaders in our fire service and unions to play a vital role. The first concept of resilience is creating positive thoughts. This concept identifies the factors that are important in creating a resilient mindset. Positive thoughts are responsible for improved performance in every area of our life. To dive deeper into this concept of creating positive thoughts, Chief of Operations Tom Richardson from FDNY and IAFF Local 947 President Dave Coker from Greensboro, North Carolina, are joining us to offer their unique perspectives. So Tom, what makes it difficult for firefighters to think positively?
Just by the nature of the work that we do, we're dealing with people when they're having a bad day. So we're coming into a negative situation right off the top. And so many times, depending on the situation, firefighters are always trying to make it better. But sometimes that's not possible depending on how bad the situation is. So when we go back to the station many times, we're always self-critiquing to see how we could have made it even better or had a better outcome than maybe what had happened.
Or maybe even complaining that it didn't go well.
Sure, and firefighters are their own self-critics, and their own worst critics, actually. So we're constantly trying to improve and make sure that we're providing the best service that we possibly can, and we always want a positive outcome, but we know just because of the work that we do that that's not always possible.
So sometimes you're not treated like you're the good guy.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I would argue that most of the time people look forward to seeing us because they know we're going to help them, we're going to try to help them. But depending on the situation, sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
Okay. So Dave, as a firefighter, do you remember more incidents with bad outcomes or bad working conditions than incidents with good ones? Why do you think that is?
Absolutely. My personal experience is that I and we as firefighters generally remember those incidents with bad outcomes more than we remember the good incidents. The bad outcomes, obviously, a lot of times it's an extremely traumatic situation. We couldn't have the impact we wanted, and so that stays with us, that sticks with us. Whereas things that we did good or incidents that went well, we just don't have time to dwell on that. Like, move on to the next thing. We did good, great, that's our job, let's go to the next thing. And so those things that linger, those things that are traumatic, those things that don't have the outcomes we want, those are the ones that are going to stick with us because maybe we could have done X, Y, and Z for a different outcome. So I think that stays with us more, absolutely.
So naturally, we just focus on those bad things that happen. The human brain is capable of processing millions of bits of information each second. But cognitively, we can only attend to a tiny sliver of this information at any given moment. Unfortunately, this means that our perspective on reality is very limited. The bucket can only hold so much water before it overflows. Tom, what is it about the fire service that fosters a negative mindset in firefighters?
Once again, the nature of the work that we do, we're responding to emergencies. We're responding to bad medical calls. We're responding to fire situations or other types of emergencies where people are in a stressful situation. So that's just negative right out of the gate, right? We're going out the door, we get a response ticket, and it's telling us that someone needs help. They're having a bad day, like I had mentioned before, and I don't know that we do a really good job in our training programs to overcome that. Like we're training for bad situations, right? We're training for situations where it could be a worst case scenario. We're trying to make sure that we can overcome whatever situation we come across, and that's actually the exciting part of firefighting and emergency service work is that every time is different. But I think we probably could do better training our folks to be able to have more positive thoughts as they go out the door on every response.
Because that's not natural. It's more natural to think negatively.
Sure.
And so it would take effort for us to try to find some of those positives on a
Sure,
shift,
and
right?
but I think we could train to it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dave, what can managers, supervisors, and crews do to focus on the positives?
Well, I think specifically, when we have post-incident analysis, or even just hot washing on the tailboard an incident, we're always going to go over those things that we need to work on, right? Okay, look, this didn't go exactly right, so we're going to train on this. But a different format of that could be, starting with, hey, this is what happened on the incident. Overall, it was good. Here's some things to work on. All right, so the beginning is positive. The middle is, hey, this is what we're going to train on moving forward. So here's some action items that we can take to address that. And then the last part is maybe the specifics of what company members did, or what, the company overall, the positive impact we did. So starting with, good job, here's what we can work on, specifically good job. And so focusing on action items and then ending on a positive note.
So maybe what could we learn from this incident,
Absolutely.
right? Instead of what we did wrong.
Right.
Just a little switch in the mindset there.
Right. You're still getting the same information out. It's more order and emphasis.
Firefighters are constantly preparing and training for worst-case scenarios in order to save lives. However, if this negative mental bias remains unchecked, it can have severe negative consequences, and it can shave years off of your life. A case in point is a key piece of research in this area known as the nun study. In this study, 180 nuns were classified as high or low on one single personality trait when they entered the convent in their early 20s. Many years later, after their deaths, it was determined that the nuns who were classified highest on this one personality trait lived an entire decade longer than the nuns who were lower. This personality trait is optimism. But we are not talking about unfounded optimism or simply looking at life through rose-colored glasses. We're talking about rational, flexible, realistic optimism in everyday life as well as in serious critical moments. There's a lot of other research to back up the importance and the effectiveness of creating this realistic optimism as a resiliency skill. In the training workshop, we will learn more about creating this mindset and how to practice it. So, Tom, your organization has faced many challenges. Can you think of one incident where leadership acknowledging the good work of their crews made a difference in the aftermath or the recovery from that incident?
Well, we could start by the, we'll call it the incident that everybody knows about, right? 9/11. And 9/11, leadership made sure that our people understood that although we lost 343 members, 37 police officers, almost 3,000 civilians were killed. It was the largest rescue operation in the history of the emergency service. 25,000 people were able to be rescued or taken out of both towers. So we made sure that that was very, very understood by our folks. In 2012, we had Hurricane Sandy hit New York City. Tremendous amount of damage, particularly on the waterfront. But our firefighters and emergency medical folks, they overcame a lot of obstacles to make sure that people were evacuated out of their neighborhoods. People did a lot of selfless things to make sure that they could help as many people as possible. We made sure that we recognized those folks for doing that type of work. That was an overwhelming incident as well. Another situation that comes up, thankfully, infrequently, when we have a firefighter fatality. Unfortunately, my experience is that sometimes when we do the investigations after the fact, we have a tendency to focus on the negative. Right? We had a firefighter pass away, so we do a better job now than ever to make sure that we take the investigation process and the recommendations that come out of the investigation process and focus on the positive things that happened, so that the firefighters don't walk away from that incident and after the fact with negative thoughts. We want to make sure that, hey, we did a lot of good things here, even though we lost a firefighter. We had some good learning outcomes.
Right. So learning from that,
Yes.
from that bad, and how we can recover from some of those incidents. There's always some kind of a good that you can find in any kind of a bad.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think the fire service in general, we tend to focus on the bad things,
Yeah.
and we need to do a better job to look at the positive outcomes or the positive lessons learned, if you will.
And easy to focus on all the destruction and to not think about all of the saves.
Correct. And, firefighters are recognized throughout the year for doing good work. In New York City, we have an annual medal day where we recognize heroic acts by our members. That's an opportunity for people to really hear about some of the work that our folks do that they don't hear about on a regular basis. And even within the department, people don't even know some of the things that happen in other parts of the city. But come medal day, they hear a story and they say, wow, that was a good thing. And we learned a lot from that. And we're better for it.
It turns out that we all have habitual ways of explaining why bad things happen to us. Research on pessimists, for example, shows that they have a very predictable explanatory style. We call it the 3 Ps. When pessimists face adversities, they tend to see these situations as permanent, pervasive, and personal. Optimists, on the other hand, when faced with the same stressors, tend to see them as temporary, limited in scope, and contributed to many factors other than just themselves, or non-personal. This subtle difference between the way optimists and pessimists explain things to themselves makes all the difference in terms of their health and performance, and the research clearly shows that optimism can be learned. Rational optimism is the mindset of resilient high achievers. So Dave, what could firefighters work on to help them deal with chronic daily hassles more effectively?
Well, I think there's a lot of things, a lot of steps that we can take to address those daily stressors. Working out, trying to get as much sleep as we can, even though that's difficult a lot of times. Maintaining good social relationships with the men and women that we work with, those good social relationships with our chain of command, and when we're home, focusing on home. And so those are some of the positive steps that we can take to address all the things that come at us on a daily basis and on a shift at the firehouse.
So there's always going to be those little things during your shift that aggravate you, those frustrating calls, but trying to not focus on those, trying to have some fun and laughter, play some, firefighter games, give each other a hard time about something in a positive way, that kind of changes the atmosphere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the card game to see who's going to wash dishes after the meal is may go on for 45 minutes, and you could have had the entire kitchen cleaned in that time. But I mean, that's team building. It's blowing off some stress. It's having some laughs, and so those things like that, and then focusing, as we've been talking about, focusing on the positive. We can just zero down on the negative, but we don't have to own that, right? We don't have to own those negative things. We can work to own the positive things and focus on those. And so whatever that is in your situation, it's better to focus on those positive outcomes and have behaviors that reinforce those positive outcomes.
That's awesome. So Tom, what can supervisors or leaders do to promote these important resiliency concepts that you guys have just talked about?
I think we have to focus on teamwork. We have to make sure that our people understand that we're all a team. We rely on one another, and that we shouldn't be afraid to talk about these things when we come back from calls, when we come back from incidents, to be able to sit down in the firehouse kitchen and actually talk to one another about it and learn from one another on what happened. Because sometimes we go to incidents and you don't even know what another team member may have done to make the outcome as good as it was, or maybe something that didn't go so well. But I think the key for supervisors is to be able to tell their folks, listen, we're a team. We do this together. We're all in this together. When we're here for our shift, we're working together, and we're going to be able to be honest with one another and say, okay, I'm not afraid to talk about it. So I think just honesty and concentrating on the fact that this is a team operation.
So whether it's the chief or the captain or the lieutenant, senior firefighter, so anybody could try to, engage in what the good things were that happened on a call.
Sure,
and
I'll
that
give you
could
an
change the whole atmosphere,
Sure.
right?
I'll give you an example of something that I started to do as a chief officer when I was working out in the field as a battalion chief. After a fire or an emergency, depending on what it was, I would often call the company officers to the front of the fire building or near the front of the incident, and I would ask them, how'd we do? And I'd try to get some feedback from them. And I even went so far as to make sure that I grabbed a lot of the young folks, probationary firefighters, and I would go around and literally say to them, give me one thing that you learned at this incident that was good. And I would make sure that they answered the question. And I did it in a non-combative way or a non-intimidating way. And I often got really, really good feedback about that. And so when they left the incident, they were thinking about, hey, this chief really cares what I think. And I thought that was a positive way to go back to the station.
Absolutely, yeah. So for every organization, management, union leadership, and supervisors need to ask themselves, is it helpful for me to think about the situation this way? Or can I think different and get a more desirable result? We've talked about that in all of these incidents. Dave, do you think leadership can do this?
Absolutely, and I can give kind of a specific example related to our local, and quite frankly, a lot of the locals in the Southeast. So I think, when I was elected president, we had about a 30% membership density. And that was a lot of reasons, and it's a very tough environment where we work. In North Carolina, we don't have collective bargaining rights, and so management doesn't have to deal with us in any capacity. And so when I was elected president and the leadership team that came in with me on the executive board, we said, all right, we're going to try to focus on the positive of what we are as a union and the resources that the IAFF can provide to our department if we can get a seat at that table. And so we planted a flag, and that flag was, this is what Local 947 is about. We're about, even though we don't have a contract, even though we can't, file grievances, we don't go to arbitration, what we can do is focus on the good things about the fire service and kind of hitch our wagon to that as a local. So we focused on being pro-service delivery, pro-training, bringing in training resources from the outside for the entire fire department, initially whether they were members or not. We focused on, we had a member or a member's spouse in the hospital. The union the local is the entity that's going to organize the meal rotation for that family. The union is going to be the entity that does the fundraiser for that member who is sick or has a sick spouse, or that member that's fallen on hard times themselves. So we're going to plant a flag. We're going to be a positive force for change within our fire department. And as a result of that, over a period of years, our membership grew. So we're now over 90% density in our local, in a non-collective bargaining state, and it really was a change in that mindset. It was that we're going to showcase value. We're going to talk about the good things that our organization can bring to the fire department and the citizens of our city. We're going to bring in training. We're going to support service delivery. We're going to have a positive message, and that positive message was one of change, and how we can again be good stewards of our members' dues and bring service to the citizens of our city.
So I think that this has been some great examples of how positive thinking can really change the outcome for individuals and organizations as a whole. Would you agree?
Yes. I think
Absolutely.
that from a management perspective, I think one final message that I would give as it relates to positive thoughts or fostering positive thoughts is that management needs to make or let our folks understand that the most important resource that we have are our people.
Right.
And if they know that coming from management and union leadership, that's a good start.
Right, and from the union perspective is, we have healthy, positive employees, there's less work for the union leaders to do, right? There's less cases of discipline. There's less cases of members getting dinged up. So this is all the direction that labor and management need to go in together, hand in hand.
Awesome. Thank you.